Respected President of the Indian Union Muslim League and of this evening, Professor Qadir Moeddin, respected President of the Indian National Congress, Shri Rahul Gandhi, leaders of many other progressive-minded parties on the dais and in the audience, friends, I hope that covers everyone. I really feel that everything that needs to be said has been said, but I could not decline Mr. Kunjalikotti's kind invitation to add a few words, if only because I have the somewhat unusual distinction of having succeeded Shri E. Ahmed not only in one portfolio but in two. I succeeded him as Minister of State for External Affairs and a couple of years later as Minister of State for Human Resource Development. So I can truly stand here to say that I have walked in his footsteps. He was, as we've all heard all evening, an extraordinary human being, somebody who incarnated many of the best values of our country, of our culture, of our civilization, and with the personal qualities of decency and humility that many have recalled with such affection. I actually met him a decade before I came into Indian politics, because he sought me out of the United Nations. He'd heard about my work there. He had come to visit his son in America, and he called me from the other coast, from Seattle. And we got to talk, we got to meet. He was incredibly gracious. I'll never forget the very warm welcome he gave me when I eventually returned to India and entered politics. Though I had been elected as a member of the Congress Party, my first entry into Parliament was Shri E. Ahmed, who brought me in and introduced me proudly to everyone. And that avuncular nature is something that I think I will always cherish as I recall him. Many have spoken today about his contributions to representing India abroad, particularly his extraordinary network of friends and relationships in the Gulf countries, which he put to good use for the country. Many have spoken of the way in which he cooperated with people of all different political parties and persuasions. And I think it's important to recall that his effectiveness as a leader was precisely not just because of what he did, but because of who he was. Rahulji mentioned that he'd become an institution. But one of the reasons he had the longevity to become an institution is because he truly was a man without enemies. This was somebody whom everyone liked. Everyone felt respected by him, everyone in turn respected him. And I think these are human qualities we don't always find in our public life, and so we must particularly appreciate them when we have them. When we gather here in these numbers, so many of us have come to pay tribute to his memory. We recall all those good qualities. Members of his family who are here knew him, of course, far better than any of us, but we saw that on the public stage was this private man, this human being who had all the human qualities that we would want to appreciate. Many of the political leaders here have spoken about the theme of defending democracy and why in remembering Shri Ahmed we must also remember the importance of defending our democracy. Shri Ahmed incarnated, as Shyam Saran said, the great strength of Indian democracy, which is that in our country you can be many things and one thing. You can be a good Muslim, a good Keralite, and a good Indian all at once. And that is indeed what Shri Ahmed represented. And that the ideal of this idea of India, a phrase that so many have used today, is an ideal which he embodied simply in what he believed, the way he conducted himself, and the way he represented our country. Can we afford to jeopardize that ideal? Can we allow, as Shri Rahman Khan reminded us, the constitution on which that ideal rests to be thrown into question? When some of us say what Shri Rahman Khan said, the answer comes, oh, but the constitution has been amended 100 times. How does it matter if it's amended once more? But the answer is, of course, everything depends on the nature of what you want to amend. All the amendments we've had have dealt with aspects of detail. The BJP and those who have been their ideologues over time have a far more fundamental critique of the Constitution than any of our 103 amendments would reflect. Whereas our Constitution was written by Dr. Ambedkar as head of the drafting committee, by Jawaharlal Nehru ji, by Rajendra Prasad as the presiding officer of the Constituent Assembly, while it was written to be a document for all the people of India, it was rejected on precisely those grounds by M.S. Golwalkar and later by the principal ideologue of the present ruling forces, Shri Deen Dayal Upadhyay. And what was their critique? They said this constitution is not just a westernized document written with foreign imported ideals by Anglophile lawyers and in the wrong language, all of which, of course, were predictable critiques. They said it is fundamentally flawed because it rests on the wrong idea of what is a nation. Their critique, and both Golwalkar and Upadhyay have written exactly the same thing, the latter in more detail than the former. They both said, this constitution believes that the nation of India is a territory called India, and everyone living on it, all the people living on it, belong to India, and the constitution is for all of them. Wrong, says Golwalkar, wrong, says Upadhyay. A nation is not a territory. It is therefore not all the people on it. A nation, they said, is a people, and the people can only be the Hindu people. And therefore the idea that the constitution should reflect the ideal of a Hindu Rashtra is fundamental to their view of what the constitution should say. So when we hear of constitutional amendments from that side of the political fence, this is not like any one of the other amendments that may enshrine women's rights or give you the right to take over land or question private property, whatever those issues may be. This is far more fundamental and goes to the heart of what the future of this country and the nature of this country is all about. That is why the living repudiation of that approach is the man we are honoring here today. E. Ahmed stood up for a different idea of India. He represented that idea abroad and he represented that idea at home. And he reminds us every day that the saffron and the green both belong on the Indian flag. Some people have forgotten. So I just want once again to recall that as we celebrate the importance of defending democracy, as we celebrate the life of a man who did defend Indian democracy, we must remember the great importance that when people leave us, it is their ideals and values, as said by many speakers today, that we must cherish. Let us hold on to this fundamentally important value, because if we don't appreciate what we have enjoyed, what we have taken for granted, we may lose it one day. I don't want to end on a disappointing or a pessimistic note. Let me once again say that as long as there have been fighters like E. Ahmed for the values that reflect our democracy and our pluralism, we will be safe, but we must never stop. We must never cease to fight. Thank you.